I went back to grab a folder I forgot at my in-laws' place. And that's when I overheard a phone call that shattered my marriage. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Isla, I'm 32 years old, and I work as a teacher. My husband, Maverick, is 34 and works as a software engineer. To anyone who saw us, we looked like the picture of stability. We'd been married 6 years, had a nice little house, and people often told us we were the kind of couple others aspired to be. I believed it too, until the day everything started to unravel. It began so simply. I had left an important folder at Margaret's house, Maverick's mother. She's 60, sharp in every sense of the word, and the kind of woman who likes to have the last word in every conversation. I drove over quickly after work, thinking I'd just grab the folder and head back home to finish grading paper. When I arrived, the house was quiet. I stepped up to the porch, already pulling my keys from my purse because Margaret never minded me letting myself in. But as I reached for the door, I heard her voice. It was low, tense, the kind of whisper people use when they don't want anyone to overhear. I froze, one hand on the doorknob, because something about her tone made me uneasy. I leaned closer, and that's when I caught the words that made my stomach twist. Yes, Maverick was with her again last night. Don't worry, I covered for him. Isla thinks he was working late. My whole body went cold. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She kept talking, her voice sharp but protective, almost like she was managing a business deal. She mentioned hotel rooms, how careful he needed to be, and how I was too naive to notice. I wanted to burst in, to demand she explain herself, but I couldn't make my legs move. My mind raced. Was this real? Was Maverick, the man I trusted, sneaking around behind my back? And his own mother was the one helping him? I pressed myself against the wall, desperate not to make a sound. My heart hammered so loud I was sure she'd hear it. Every word that came out of her mouth cut into me like glass. She wasn't just aware of his affair. She was actively covering it, making sure I stayed in the dark. The folder I had come for suddenly seemed meaningless. I slipped away from the door as quietly as I could, my hands shaking, my chest tight. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage crumbled in those few stolen minutes. I had gone back for a simple folder, but instead I had stumbled onto a secret that would change my life forever. I clutched the folder tightly against my chest as I walked back to my car, my hands trembling so badly that I almost dropped it. Somehow, I managed to get inside without Margaret noticing me, and I drove away in silence, staring at the road but not really seeing it. My heart kept pounding in my ears, and I felt like the world had tilted beneath me. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had forced my face into something calm, but inside I was unraveling. That night, Maverick was sitting on the couch with his laptop when I came in. He looked up, smiled casually, and asked me about my day. I studied his face as if I could read the truth there. His eyes looked the same, his voice steady, but everything felt different now. Every move he made seemed suspicious. I answered his questions quietly, trying to act normal, but in my chest it felt like a storm was building. Later, while I was washing dishes, I heard his phone buzz. Maverick picked it up quickly and walked toward the hallway. His voice dropped, soft and careful, but I caught pieces of the conversation. Yeah, no, she doesn't know. I told her it was work again. Don't worry, I'll handle it. He chuckled softly, then lowered his voice so much I couldn't make out the rest. When he returned, he wore that same calm smile, but my stomach turned at the sight of it. That night I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. My mind dragged me back to all the moments I had brushed off before. I remembered the times he came home late, saying there was a project deadline. I remembered how Margaret would always jump in to defend him whenever I asked questions, her sharp tone telling me not to nag him, as if I were the problem for even wondering. I remembered the business trips that seemed to come up suddenly, trips where he'd leave with barely any notice and return with vague stories that never added up. The pieces fell together now like a cruel puzzle I hadn't wanted to see before. He hadn't been working late every time. Those trips weren't all business. And Margaret had been there in the background, making sure I never pushed too hard, covering for him with excuses so smooth they had almost convinced me. I rolled onto my side, looking at Maverick's back as he slept peacefully. My throat tightened and tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had been living in a carefully crafted lie, one that both my husband and his mother had built together. Lying there in the dark, I realized something that chilled me more than anything. This betrayal hadn't just started. It had been going on for years, right under my nose, and the two people who should have cared for me most had been keeping me blind. A few days later, I decided to stop by Margaret's house again. I told Maverick I was dropping off some papers nearby, so it wouldn't seem strange. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I pulled up to her driveway. I had rehearsed a calm smile in the mirror before leaving, but inside I was on edge. I needed answers, and I wanted to hear her say something without realizing I was digging. Margaret welcomed me in with her usual sharp smile. She always carried herself like she was the one in control, even when she was just offering a cup of coffee. I sat down in her living room, pretending to relax. We made small talk about work, about the weather, but I carefully steered the conversation toward relationships. "You and Mr. Carter were married for so long," I said, trying to sound casual. "What do you think makes a marriage work?" She leaned back in her chair, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Compromise," she said quickly. "A woman needs to understand her place. Men have their own ways, their own needs. Pushing too hard only drives them away." Her tone was smug, almost amused, like she was teaching me a lesson I should have known. I stirred my coffee slowly, fighting to keep my face neutral. "So if a husband is dishonest," I asked carefully, "you think it's better to look the other way?" Margaret gave a short laugh, waving her hand like it was nothing. "Honest, dishonest, those are just words. Men will always be men. If Maverick is giving you a stable home and a comfortable life, that's what matters. Don't waste your energy chasing every little thing. Be grateful you have him." Her words hit me like a slap, though her tone was smooth, almost sweet. She wasn't just aware of what he was doing, she was defending it, encouraging it, as if my pain didn't count. She looked me right in the eye as she said it, her expression smug, as if she was daring me to argue. I forced a small smile and nodded like I understood, though my stomach twisted inside me. In that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just betrayal from Maverick anymore. It was a partnership between him and his mother, a team built on lies and control. She wasn't trying to protect me. She was protecting him, and worse, she was mocking me for not playing along with her rules. As I left her house, her words kept echoing in my head. Be grateful. Men will always be men. They weren't advice. They were permission slips she had been handing Maverick for years. Walking back to my car, I knew I could never see her the same way again. My anger burned hotter than my hurt, and a new thought began to take root. If she was going to play games with my life, I wasn't going to just sit quietly anymore. For the first time, I felt the sharp edge of revenge forming in my mind. One night after Maverick had gone to bed, I stayed in the living room pretending to finish some work. I waited until his breathing grew steady, then quietly slipped into our bedroom. My hands shook as I pulled open his dresser drawers, searching through the places I never thought I would look. At first, it was just old receipts and loose change, but then I found a folded envelope tucked under some socks. Inside were hotel receipts, different places, different dates. None of them matched the trips he had told me about. I carried the papers to the kitchen, spreading them out on the table under the dim light. Each receipt had his name on it, the dates covering nights when he claimed to be working late or traveling for business. My chest ached as I read them over and over, the truth becoming clearer with every slip of paper. The next day while Maverick showered, I went through his desk. That's when I found a credit card I had never seen before, tucked in a file marked taxes. I checked the statements online using his laptop. There were charges for expensive dinners, flowers, even jewelry, things I had never received. My stomach dropped, but I kept scrolling, forcing myself to face it. The worst blow came from his phone. One evening when he left it charging in the kitchen, I opened it with the code I already knew. At first, there were no obvious messages, but then I found a hidden folder with his deleted texts. Her name was there, Samantha. She was 29, a co-worker of his, and their messages were sickeningly clear. She called him baby, he promised her weekends, and they spoke about nights in the very hotels I had receipts for. I sat frozen at the counter, reading their conversations, my hands cold and numb. Samantha laughed about me without ever using my name. Maverick told her not to worry, that I never suspected a thing. My heart felt like it was tearing apart inside me, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. Every detail, every lie he had told me, was right there in front of me. When I finally put the phone down, I didn't cry. The tears had burned out of me, leaving only a heavy anger. I opened my laptop and started saving copies, screenshots of texts, downloads of bank statements, photos of the receipts. Piece by piece, I built a record of his betrayal, each document another weapon I tucked away. I didn't say anything to him that night or the next. I smiled when he talked, kissed him goodnight, and acted like nothing had changed. Inside, though, everything had changed. I wasn't just a hurt wife anymore. I was a woman with proof. And I knew I wouldn't speak a word until I had enough to break both him and Margaret wide open. I decided not to confront Maverick right away. Instead, I slipped into a role I never thought I'd play. At home, I became the same caring wife he thought I had always been. I cooked his favorite meals, asked about his day, and even laughed at his tired jokes. Every smile I gave him was fake, but it kept him from suspecting that I knew the truth. The more relaxed I acted, the more careless he became. He would come home late, claiming he had been stuck in meetings. Sometimes his shirt carried a faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Other nights he walked in humming, his mood too light for someone who had been buried in work. He thought I was blind, but I noticed every detail. I started keeping a small recorder hidden near the couch where he often sat with his phone. When he made calls late at night, thinking I was asleep, I caught every word. Sometimes he whispered, sometimes he laughed softly, his voice tender in a way it hadn't been with me in years. I lay in bed listening to the faint sound of his voice in the other room, my fists tight against the sheets. Later, I would play the recordings back in secret, storing them away with the rest of my growing collection of evidence. Margaret, of course, still played her part. One weekend we had dinner with her at her house. She fussed over Maverick like he was still a boy, praising his job and his achievements. At one point, when I asked a harmless question about his schedule, she shot me a look and said, "Maverick is such a good man. Don't push him too hard, Isla. He works so much to give you a good life." Her words were coated in sugar, but carried the same sting as always. I forced a polite smile, nodding as if she had given me wise advice. Inside, though, her arrogance only fed the fire burning in me. She thought I was weak, that I would swallow every excuse and carry on as if nothing were wrong. She didn't know I already had the truth sitting in a hidden folder at home. That night after dinner, I watched Maverick fall asleep on the couch, his phone slipping from his hand. His face looked peaceful, like he had no idea his lies were crumbling. I stood there quietly, studying him, feeling a strange calm wash over me. He believed I was still in the dark, but in reality I was already 3 steps ahead. Every joke I laughed at, every meal I cooked, every smile I gave, it was all part of a mask. Beneath it, my plan was taking shape. I wasn't going to scream or beg or cry in front of them. I was going to wait until the time was right, and then I would take everything they thought they controlled and tear it out from under them. Our anniversary was coming up, and Maverick had promised me weeks before that we'd go out to celebrate. I held on to that plan, even though I already knew the truth about him. Part of me wanted to see if he would keep his word. On the morning of the dinner, he kissed my cheek and told me not to make any plans for the evening. For a moment, I almost believed he might surprise me with something thoughtful. But just hours before, he called from work with his tired excuse. "I'm so sorry, Isla. There's a last-minute project. I can't get away tonight." His voice sounded practiced, smooth, the same tone he always used when he thought he was outsmarting me. I didn't argue. I simply said, "Okay," and hung up. But inside, I felt a sharp snap, like the last thread holding me back had broken. That night, instead of sitting at home alone, I followed him. I kept my distance as his car pulled out of the office lot. My hands gripped the wheels so tightly they hurt, but I stayed focused, trailing him quietly. My heart raced faster with every turn until he pulled into the glowing driveway of a hotel. From the shadows of the parking lot, I watched as he stepped out of his car, straightened his jacket, and looked around. Then she appeared, Samantha. She walked toward him with a smile that made my stomach twist. Maverick leaned in and kissed her like he had kissed me for years, casual and familiar, as though I didn't exist. I lifted my phone and snapped photo after photo, their arms around each other, their lips meeting, the two of them walking into the hotel lobby together. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the phone, but I forced myself to keep clicking. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I sat in my car long after they disappeared inside, the weight of it pressing down on me. For a moment, tears blurred my vision, and the pain spread through my chest like fire. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of believing his lies, and here he was, walking into a hotel with someone else on the night we were supposed to celebrate our life together. But then the tears dried. My breathing slowed. A calm settled over me, not the calm of peace, but the calm of resolve. I had the evidence I needed, and I wasn't going to waste it on a screaming match in a hotel parking lot. I drove home, my mind already turning over what came next. The following morning, I called Margaret. My voice was steady as I told her I knew everything. There was silence on her end, then a sharp reply. "Don't ruin the family, Isla. Let it go. Think of everything Maverick gives you." Her warning only hardened me. She wasn't asking me to protect the family. She was asking me to protect her son. That was the moment I knew. I wouldn't just leave Maverick. I would take everything he thought he had, everything his mother thought she controlled, and I would make sure neither of them forgot what they had done to me. The morning after that phone call with Margaret, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I stared at the folder of proof I had gathered and knew there was no turning back. Quietly, without saying a word to Maverick, I searched for a lawyer. I wanted someone sharp, someone who could guide me through this without slipping a single detail to him. When I finally sat down in the lawyer's office, I felt nervous but also steady. I explained everything, handed over the photos, the receipts, the messages. He didn't need to say much. The evidence spoke for itself. Divorce papers were drawn up, and I signed my name with a calm hand, even though my heart was pounding. The next step was protecting myself. Maverick thought he had control of our finances, but I knew enough to shift things quietly. I opened a separate account and moved money little by little, amounts small enough that he wouldn't notice right away. It felt strange at first, sneaky even, but then I reminded myself of the nights he had walked into hotel rooms with someone else. This wasn't betrayal, it was survival. Every day, I played my part at home. I smiled, cooked, asked about his day, and all the while I knew what was waiting for him. The lawyer had suggested keeping everything quiet until the right moment. I agreed, but in my heart, I wanted more than a quiet ending. I wanted Margaret to watch her perfect picture of her son shatter in front of everyone she loved to impress. That's when the idea came to me. Family dinners were a tradition Margaret never let slip. Once a month she invited everyone, siblings, cousins, family friends, and she always sat at the head of the table, proud and controlling. I decided that would be the stage. It wasn't enough for Maverick to know I had caught him. Margaret had defended him, shielded him, and mocked me for questioning him. I wanted her pride stripped away in front of the very people she tried to rule over. So I waited. I circled the date of the next family dinner on the calendar and prepared. I placed copies of everything into a neat folder: photos, credit card statements, messages. I made sure the lawyer had filed the paper and that I was protected no matter how ugly it got. At night, while Maverick slept, I rehearsed in my mind how it would go. I pictured Margaret's face when I laid the evidence on the table, the silence of the room when every lie came crashing down. For once, she wouldn't be the one with the sharp words and the smug smile. For once, she would be powerless. I didn't feel guilt, not even a trace. They had built this lie together, and now I would end it together, in the one place Margaret thought she had the most control. The family dinner would no longer be her victory, it would be mine. At a Sunday dinner with both families, Isla pretends everything is normal. She smiles as she helps pass the bread, laughs softly at a cousin's story, and nods along to conversations about work and vacations. Her hands move gracefully, pouring drinks, cutting food, and offering seconds, but inside she feels the weight of what she has carried for weeks. Across the table, Maverick looks comfortable, leaning back in his chair, certain that his double life is safe. Margaret sits tall at the head of the table, satisfied as always, her sharp voice cutting through the noise when she wants everyone's attention. The smell of roasted meat and garlic fills the room, glasses clink, and conversation rises and falls. Isla chews slowly, her eyes calm, her voice steady. She joins in when people laugh, thanks Margaret politely for the meal, and keeps her mask in place. No one notices the quiet storm building inside her. Halfway through the meal, when plates are half empty and the chatter has reached its peak, Isla sets down her fork and folds her napkin neatly. She lets a few moments pass, then places her hands on the table. "I have something to share with everyone," she says, her voice steady but firm. The room falls silent. A cousin lowers his fork. An aunt looks up, surprised. Maverick turns toward her, his brow furrowed in confusion. Margaret narrows her eyes, already irritated by the interruption. Isla reaches into her bag and pulls out a folder. She opens it carefully and begins laying papers across the table. Hotel receipts with Maverick's name. Credit card statements filled with dinners and jewelry she never received. Then the photographs. Maverick with Samantha, his arm around her, his lips pressed against her. Gasps ripple around the table as the evidence spreads across the linen cloth. Maverick stammers, his face pale. "Isla, this isn't what it looks like." His words tumble out, weak and broken. Isla's hand lifts slightly, silencing him. "Don't lie again. Everyone here can see exactly what it is." Her voice is calm, but the steel in it cuts deeper than shouting ever could. Margaret leans forward, her tone sharp. "Now, Isla, there's no need to humiliate the family. Every marriage has its difficulties. You shouldn't." Isla cuts her off, her eyes locked on Margaret's. "You knew. I heard you. You covered for him, lied for him, and told me to be grateful while he betrayed me. Don't pretend you weren't part of this." The color drains from Margaret's face. She opens her mouth, but no words come. The smug superiority she always carried is gone, replaced by silence and shame. Isla looks around the table, meeting the eyes of each relative. This isn't just his betrayal. It's her protection of it. "But I'm done." She pulls out one last paper and places it on the table. "These are divorce papers. They've already been filed." The room stays quiet. Maverick buries his face in his hand. Margaret stares at the table, her authority crumbling in front of the very people she once ruled over. Isla pushes back her chair, stands tall, and gathers her bag. Without raising her voice, without another word, she walks to the door. The silence of the room follows her, heavy and absolute. For the first time, she feels free. As soon as I reached the front door, Maverick rushed after me. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he grabbed my arm. "Please, Isla, don't do this," he begged, his voice cracking. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can fix it, I swear. Just give me another chance." His eyes darted desperately, searching my face for even a small sign that I might soften. I looked at him, steady and calm. My silence was my answer. I pulled my arm free from his grasp and stepped back. He tried again, his words tumbling out in panic. It didn't mean anything. You're my wife. I love you. Don't throw everything away because of one mistake. His voice shook, but all I felt was emptiness. After everything I had uncovered, after all the lies, his begging sounded hollow. Then Margaret's voice rang out behind him, sharp and cutting. You're being vindictive, Isla. Families don't air their dirty laundry like that. You've humiliated us all tonight. You could have come to me privately, and we could have worked this out. Her tone was scolding, as if I were a child, and she still held authority over me. I turned my head toward her and met her glare. I didn't argue. I didn't shout back. I had nothing left to say. My silence was enough. Without another word, I opened the door and walked out, the soft click behind me louder than any fight could have been. In the days that followed, the truth spread quickly. Word traveled from one relative to another, from friends to coworkers. Everyone soon knew about Maverick's betrayal and Margaret's part in hiding it. His reputation, the perfect image he had worked so hard to maintain, crumbled piece by piece. People at his office stopped inviting him to lunches, cousins avoided him at family gatherings, and friends who once admired him kept their distance. Samantha, the woman he had risked our marriage for, quickly pulled away too. At first her texts grew shorter, her calls less frequent, until one day they stopped altogether. She didn't want to deal with a man drowning in legal troubles and losing everything. It didn't take long before she was gone from his life completely, leaving him to face the wreckage alone. Meanwhile, I stayed in the home we had once shared, the house I now owned fully. Maverick had to pack up his things and leave, and the only place he had left was Margaret's. He moved back into the very house where the lies had started, carrying his shame with him. Now it's just the two of them, mother and son, stuck together. I imagine them sitting in that quiet house. No more smug superiority, no more secrets to hide, only the weight of everything they lost. And for the first time in years, I feel free knowing that I walked away, and they're left with nothing but each other. I signed the final divorce papers with steady hands, and just like that, it was over. Maverick and I were no longer tied together. The house was mine, along with a settlement that gave me the security I needed. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, noticing the sunlight coming in through the windows. For the first time, it felt like home belonged only to me. At one time, I thought his betrayal would break me. I thought I would be left in pieces, too weak to stand. But instead, I found a strength I didn't know I had. Each step I took away from him was a step closer to myself. I planted flowers in the yard, bright colors he never wanted. I painted the kitchen walls in shades that warmed the room, shades he would have called too loud. With each change, the house shed the weight of the past and began to breathe again. There were nights I remembered the pain, the lies, the excuses, the way Margaret defended him. For a moment, the ache would return. But then I reminded myself, I had walked away. I hadn't stayed silent. I had chosen myself, even when it hurt. That thought always brought me peace. I started living in ways I had once put aside. I met friends I hadn't seen in years, joined a small hiking group on weekend, and even tried painting. Little by little, life felt full again. People asked if the house felt lonely now. It didn't. The quiet felt safe. No more waiting up, no more smelling perfume on his clothes, no more pretending. The silence was mine, and it felt like freedom. One afternoon, I found the same folder I had gone back for at Margaret's house. I held it in my hands, tracing the edges. It struck me how everything had changed because of that moment. I thought I had gone back for a few sheets of paper, but what I truly found that day was the truth. The truth ended my marriage, but it also freed me from lies, from betrayal, from living in a world where I was always kept in the dark. That folder reminded me of pain, yes, but also of the strength that grew out of it. I closed it gently, a small smile on my face. This wasn't about loss anymore. It was about freedom, about courage, and about finding myself again. That folder changed everything. But in the end, it gave me back the one thing I had forgotten how to hold on to, me. Do you think I did the right thing by leaving Maverick and Margaret behind? Or should I have stayed and given them another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more betrayal and revenge stories, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned.